The moon hung like a pale ghost in the endless blackness of space. It was cold, lifeless, and unwelcoming, a place no one would choose to call home. Yet for Aaron Blake and his small group of settlers, it was the only home they had left. The colony, once filled with dreams of discovery and riches, now stood as a crumbling relic of failure. The domes that housed them were patched together with salvaged materials, their walls scarred by time and neglect. Outside, the howling winds carried fine particles of dust that stung like needles, and the ground was littered with jagged rocks. It was not a place meant for humans. Aaron leaned against the cracked window of the main dome, staring out at the barren landscape. His wife, Clara, sat nearby, her hands busy mending a torn jacket. The silence between them was heavy, weighed down by years of hardship and disappointment. They rarely spoke about Earth anymore. What was the point? Earth had forgotten them long ago. The last supply ship had come more than a decade earlier, and even then, it brought little hope. Since then, they had been on their own, scraping by with what little they had. But survival wasn't their only worry. Beyond the safety of the domes lurked something far worse: alien predators. No one knew where they came from or how they survived in such a harsh environment. But they were there, watching, waiting. Every venture outside the colony was a gamble, every step taken with caution. More than once, settlers had disappeared without a trace, leaving behind only shredded clothing and claw marks etched into the ground. Clara broke the silence first. "Do you think anyone will ever come back for us?" Her voice was soft, almost hesitant, as if she feared the answer. Aaron sighed, turning away from the window. "I don't know," he admitted. "Maybe someday, but we can't count on it." Despite his words, Aaron often found himself thinking about Earth. He imagined bustling cities, green fields, and skies that weren't always dark. Sometimes, late at night, he would climb to the highest point of the colony and look up at the stars, searching for some sign of life beyond their tiny world. But all he ever saw was emptiness. One evening, while checking the perimeter cameras, Aaron noticed something unusual. A faint light blinked in the distance, too steady to be a star. He adjusted the camera's focus, trying to get a clearer view, but the light vanished as quickly as it had appeared. For a moment, he wondered if he imagined it. But deep down, he couldn't shake the feeling that something, or someone, was out there. The next day, Aaron shared his observation with Clara. She listened quietly, her expression unreadable. When he finished, she simply nodded. "If it's true," she said, "then maybe we're not alone after all." Days passed, and the light didn't reappear. Life in the colony continued as it always had, monotonous, difficult, and tinged with fear. But Aaron couldn't stop thinking about what he'd seen. Was it a trick of the mind, or was it real? And if it was real, who, or what, had sent it? Unbeknownst to Aaron and the others, the blinking light had indeed been real. It was a signal, one that had traveled across vast distances of space, carrying a desperate cry for help. Decades earlier, the settlers had sent out a distress call, hoping someone would hear them. Now, finally, someone had. And though they didn't know it yet, Earth's most dreaded fleet was already on its way. Captain Rachel Monroe stood on the bridge of her flagship, staring at the holographic map floating in front of her. The image showed a distant moon orbiting a gas giant, its surface pockmarked and barren. It looked like any other unremarkable piece of rock in the vastness of space. But Rachel knew better. This was no ordinary mission. Somewhere beneath that lifeless crust lay secrets that could change everything. "Commander," Lieutenant Daniel Harper said, breaking the silence. His voice carried a hint of skepticism. "Why are we being sent all the way out here for this? It's just a forgotten colony. No one's even heard from them in years." Rachel turned to face him, her expression calm but firm. "Because," she replied, "what they found, or what we think they found, is bigger than any of us." She gestured toward the map, which zoomed in on the moon's surface. A blinking red dot marked the location of the colony. Intelligence suggests there's alien technology buried under their feet. Ancient tech. If it's real, it could give Earth an edge we've never had before. Daniel frowned, glancing at navigator Sophie Grant, who sat nearby monitoring the ship's systems. Sophie shrugged slightly, avoiding his gaze. She didn't look convinced either. None of them did. To most of the crew, this mission felt like a waste of time and resources. Why bother chasing old rumors about a colony everyone had already written off? But Rachel wasn't so quick to dismiss it. She had seen enough in her career to know that sometimes the smallest leads could uncover the biggest truths. Still, she understood her team's doubts. They were risking their lives traveling to the edge of known space for something that might not even exist. And if it did exist, there was no guarantee it would be safe or useful. As the fleet sped through the void, days passed in tense preparation. Rachel spent hours reviewing data and coordinating with her officers. She wanted every detail covered, every risk accounted for. At night, though, when the hum of the engines faded into the background, she allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. Looking out at the endless stars, she wondered what awaited them. Would they find survivors? Or would they arrive only to discover ruins and danger? Sophie interrupted her thoughts one evening as they reviewed the final approach plans. "Captain," she said hesitantly, "what happens if... well, if we get there and it's not what we expect?" Rachel paused, considering the question. "Then we adapt," she said finally. "We came prepared for anything. That's why we're here, to figure out the truth, whatever it is." The closer they got to the moon, the more uneasy the crew became. Strange readings began to appear on their instruments. Fluctuations in energy levels, unusual magnetic fields. Sophie worked tirelessly to analyze the data, but much of it defied explanation. "It's like the moon itself is alive," she muttered during one late-night shift. When they finally entered orbit, the sight below took their breath away. The colony was smaller than expected, clinging precariously to the jagged surface like a fragile shell. There were no signs of activity. No lights, no movement. Just silence. It looked abandoned, almost haunted. Rachel ordered scout drones to deploy immediately, mapping the area while a ground team prepared to make contact. Daniel volunteered to lead the mission, bringing along medic Ethan Cole and engineer Mia Torres. As they suited up, Rachel gave them one last warning. "Stay sharp. We don't know what's waiting for us down there." As the shuttle descended toward the colony, the crew braced themselves for the unknown. Whatever lay ahead, they were ready, or so they thought. The shuttle descended slowly through the thin atmosphere, its thrusters kicking up clouds of fine dust that swirled like ghosts in the dim light. Below, the colony looked even worse up close. Its domes cracked and patched, their once white surfaces now dull and gray. It was hard to believe anyone could survive here, let alone for years. Daniel Harper gripped the controls tightly, his eyes scanning the barren landscape for any sign of movement. Beside him, Ethan Cole checked his medical kit one last time, while Mia Torres adjusted the settings on her handheld scanner. Still no response from the colony. Maya said, breaking the silence. Her voice carried a nervous edge. "Either they don't want to talk to us, or they can't." Daniel didn't reply. He focused on landing the shuttle near the largest dome, its metal frame sagging slightly under the weight of time. As the craft touched down, the three of them exchanged uneasy glances. Something about this place felt wrong, not just the emptiness, but the heaviness of it, as if the air itself was holding its breath. They stepped out cautiously, boots crunching against the rocky ground. The wind howled faintly, carrying with it an icy chill that seeped through their suits. Ahead, the entrance to the dome stood partially open, its heavy door hanging crookedly on rusted hinges. Daniel motioned for the others to follow as he led the way inside. The interior was dark, lit only by weak emergency lights flickering along the walls. Dust covered everything: the floors, the tables, the equipment abandoned long ago. It looked less like a home and more like a tomb. Yet, as they moved deeper into the dome, they began to notice signs of life. Half-eaten meals left on plates, blankets thrown carelessly over chairs, tools scattered across workbenches. Whoever lived here hadn't planned to leave. "Hello," Daniel called out, his voice echoing through the empty corridors. "Is anyone here?" For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Then, from somewhere deeper within the dome, came the sound of footsteps, slow, hesitant, as if unsure whether to approach. Daniel signaled for Ethan and Mia to stay back as he turned toward the noise. A figure emerged from the shadows, their face pale and drawn, their clothes tattered and dirty. It took a second for Daniel to recognize them as human. "You're alive," the man said, his voice hoarse, as if he hadn't spoken in days. He blinked rapidly, staring at the newcomers like they were mirages. Behind him, another person appeared, a woman, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Yes, we're alive," Daniel replied gently. "We're here to help. Who are you?" The man hesitated before answering. "Aaron Blake," he said finally. "This is Clara." He gestured to the woman beside him. "We thought no one would come." Over the next few minutes, Aaron and Clara explained what had happened to the colony. Most of the settlers had died over the years, some from illness, others from accidents or attacks by alien predators. Those who remained were barely surviving, clinging to hope that someday someone would remember them. But as they spoke, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't telling him everything. Meanwhile, back aboard the flagship, Captain Rachel Monroe watched the live feed from the ground team's cameras. The condition of the colony shocked her. It was worse than she'd imagined. When Aaron mentioned the predators, her brow furrowed. "What kind of predators?" she asked over the comms. Aaron hesitated again, exchanging a glance with Clara. "Big ones," he said finally. "Fast. They hunt at night. We've tried to fight them off." But his voice trailed off, leaving the rest unsaid. Before Rachel could press further, Sophie Grant interrupted urgently. "Captain, we're picking up strange readings coming from beneath the surface. There's something down there. Something big." Rachel leaned closer to the monitor, her mind racing. Whatever secrets lay hidden on this moon, they were closer than she'd thought. But as she gave orders to investigate further, one thing was clear. This mission was far from over, and far more dangerous than anyone had anticipated. Aaron led the ground team through the dimly lit corridors of the colony, his steps slow and deliberate. The air inside was stale, carrying the faint smell of rust and decay. Clara followed closely behind him, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, as if trying to shield herself from more than just the cold. Daniel, Ethan, and Mia stayed close, their flashlights cutting through the shadows that clung to every corner. The settlers' living quarters were cramped and cluttered, filled with makeshift furniture and personal belongings left untouched for years. On one table, a child's toy lay covered in dust, its cheerful colors faded but still visible. It was a stark reminder of how much these people had lost, and how little they had left. As they walked, Aaron spoke quietly about the early days of the colony. "We came here thinking we'd find something valuable," he said, his voice tinged with bitterness. "But all we found was death." He paused, pointing to a wall covered in scratches, deep gouges that looked like they'd been made by claws. "That's what the predators do. They wait until nightfall, then strike." Daniel nodded, though his mind was elsewhere. Something about this place didn't add up. The settlers' desperation was clear, but there was also an underlying tension, a sense that Aaron and Clara weren't telling them everything. When he asked about the strange readings Sophie had detected underground, both of them exchanged uneasy glances. "We don't go down there," Clara said finally, her tone firm. "Not anymore." "Why not?" Maya asked, her curiosity getting the better of her. She held up her scanner, which continued to pick up faint energy signals pulsing from below. "What's down there?" Aaron hesitated before answering. "Ruins," he said simply. "Old ones. Alien. We found them when we first got here. At first, we thought they might be valuable. Artifacts. Technology, who knows. But after what happened, his voice trailed off, leaving the rest unsaid. What happened? Ethan pressed gently, sensing the weight behind Aaron's words. Clara stepped forward, her expression grim. People started disappearing. Not just because of the predators outside, but because of whatever's down there. One day, you'd send someone into the tunnels, and they'd never come back. Or if they did, she shuddered, unable to finish. Back aboard the flagship, Captain Rachel Monroe listened intently to the conversation via the live feed. Her fingers drummed against the armrest of her chair as she processed the information. Alien ruins, disappearances, energy readings. None of it sat well with her. Whatever secrets lay beneath the surface, they were far more complicated and dangerous than anyone had anticipated. Sophie Grant leaned over her console, analyzing the data streaming in from Mia's scanner. "Captain," she said suddenly, her voice sharp with urgency, "these readings, they're not random. They're forming a pattern, like some kind of signal." Rachel frowned. "A signal? From what?" "I'm not sure," Sophie admitted, "but it's coming from deep underground, and it's growing stronger." Meanwhile, back in the colony, Aaron reluctantly agreed to show the team the entrance to the tunnels. He led them to a locked door at the far end of the dome, its surface scarred with dents and scratches. As he unlocked it, the sound of metal grinding against metal echoed loudly in the silence. Beyond the door lay a steep staircase descending into darkness. "This is as far as I go," Aaron said firmly, stepping back. "If you want to see what's down there, you'll have to go alone." Daniel glanced at Ethan and Mia, who nodded despite the unease written across their faces. Turning on their helmet lights, the three of them began their descent, leaving Aaron and Clara standing at the top, watching silently as the beams of light disappeared into the abyss. The deeper they went, the colder the air became. The walls of the tunnel were smooth, almost unnaturally so, and covered in strange symbols etched into the stone. Some glowed faintly, casting an eerie blue light that danced across the floor. The hum of energy grew louder, vibrating through the soles of their boots. Then they reached a massive chamber. In its center stood a towering structure, ancient, alien, and unmistakably artificial. Its surface pulsed with a soft, rhythmic glow, as if alive. For a moment, none of them spoke. All they could do was stare, awestruck by the sight before them. But their wonder quickly turned to dread when the ground beneath their feet trembled, and a low growl echoed through the chamber. Something was waking up. The tremor started small, a faint vibration that rippled through the floor of the chamber. But within seconds, it grew stronger, shaking loose rocks from the ceiling and sending clouds of dust swirling into the air. Daniel's flashlight beam wavered as he tried to steady himself, his heart pounding in his chest. Beside him, Ethan and Mia exchanged wide-eyed looks, their earlier awe replaced by raw fear. "What was that?" Mia whispered, her voice barely audible over the growing rumble. "I don't know," Daniel replied, his eyes scanning the shadows around them. "But we need to get out of here. Now." Before they could move, the glowing structure in the center of the chamber pulsed brighter, its rhythm faster and more erratic. The air seemed to hum with energy, pressing against their skin like an invisible force. Then, from the darkness beyond the light, came a sound. A deep, guttural growl that echoed off the walls and sent chills down their spines. "Something's coming," Ethan said, gripping the handle of his weapon tightly. His medical kit hung forgotten at his side, useless against whatever lurked in the shadows. The growl turned into a roar, loud enough to make the ground quake beneath their feet. A massive shape emerged from the darkness, its silhouette jagged and unnatural. As it stepped into the dim light, the team froze, their breaths catching in unison. It was unlike anything they had ever seen, a creature taller than any human, its body covered in thick, armored plates that shimmered faintly in the glow of the alien machine. Its eyes glowed red, fixed on them with predatory intent. "Move," Daniel shouted, snapping them out of their shock. They turned and ran, their boots slipping on the uneven ground as the creature let out another deafening roar behind them. The tunnel back to the surface felt impossibly long, every step weighed down by the knowledge that the monster was gaining on them. The walls shook violently as it charged after them, its claws scraping against the stone. Dust rained down from above, making it hard to see or breathe. "We're not going to make it," Mia cried, her voice trembling. "Yes, we are," Daniel shot back, his tone sharp but determined. He grabbed her arm, pulling her forward when she stumbled. "Keep moving." Ethan brought up the rear, turning briefly to fire his weapon at the creature. The shots hit its armored hide, but did little more than enrage it further. It roared again, louder this time, and surged forward with terrifying speed. Finally, they reached the staircase leading up to the colony. Bursting through the door at the top, they found Aaron and Clara waiting anxiously outside. Their faces paled when they saw the terror in the team's eyes, and the shadowy figure rising up the stairs behind them. "Close the door," Daniel yelled, skidding to a stop. Aaron didn't hesitate. He slammed the heavy metal door shut just as the creature lunged forward, its claws scraping against the other side. The impact rattled the entire frame, but the door held. For now, panting heavily, the group backed away, putting as much distance between themselves and the entrance as possible. Clara clutched Aaron's arm, her knuckles white. What was that thing?" she stammered. "I told you we don't go down there anymore," Aaron said grimly, though his voice shook slightly. "That's why." Mia sank to the floor, clutching her scanner, which still buzzed faintly with residual energy readings. "Whatever it is, it's guarding something," she said, her voice hollow. "That machine, it's important. Too important." Back aboard the flagship, Captain Rachel Monroe listened to the frantic report from Daniel's team. Her jaw tightened as she processed the details. Alien ruins, a monstrous guardian. Energy signals growing stronger by the minute. This mission had gone from risky to outright dangerous in a matter of hours. "We can't leave yet," Rachel said firmly, addressing her officers. "If that machine is as powerful as it seems, we need to understand it. But we also can't risk losing anyone else." Sophie Grant leaned over her console, her brow furrowed. "Captain, I've been analyzing the energy patterns. They're not consistent with natural phenomena. Someone, or something, might be controlling them." Rachel nodded slowly, her mind racing. Whoever, or whatever, was behind this, they were running out of time to find answers. And as the distant hum of the alien machine continued to resonate through the colony below, one thing was clear. They weren't alone on this moon anymore. Tensions aboard the flagship were rising, and Captain Rachel Monroe could feel the weight of it pressing down on her. The discovery of the alien machine, and the monstrous creature guarding it, had thrown everything into chaos. Back in the colony, Aaron and Clara's distrust of the fleet was growing clearer by the hour. They didn't want to share what they knew, and their reluctance made Rachel uneasy. She couldn't shake the feeling that the settlers were hiding something important. In the main dome, Rachel confronted Aaron directly. Her tone was calm but firm. "We're here to help," she said, meeting his gaze. "But we can't do that unless you tell us the truth. What else is down there?" Aaron hesitated, his jaw tightening. Beside him, Clara crossed her arms, her expression guarded. "You think we're lying?" she asked sharply. "After everything we've been through, you still don't trust us?" "It's not about trust," Rachel replied. "It's about survival, for all of us. That machine isn't just some artifact. It's dangerous, and if we don't figure out how to handle it, none of us are getting off this moon alive." Aaron sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. For a moment, he looked like he might relent, but then Clara stepped forward, her voice rising. "And what happens when you get what you came for? Will you just leave us here? Forget about us again, like Earth already did?" Rachel opened her mouth to respond, but before she could speak, Lieutenant Daniel Harper entered the room. His face was pale, and he carried an urgency that silenced everyone. "Captain," he said, his voice low but urgent, "we have a problem." Rachel turned to him immediately. "What is it?" "Some of the crew," Daniel began, glancing at Aaron and Clara, before lowering his voice further. "They've started dismantling parts of the colony, salvaging materials. They say it's for repairs, but—" He trailed off, letting the implication hang in the air. Rachel's eyes narrowed. "Who authorized this?" "No one," Daniel admitted. "They're acting on their own. Some of them think, well, they think the settlers aren't worth saving." The room fell silent. Aaron and Clara exchanged a look, anger flashing across their faces. Clara stepped closer to Rachel, her voice trembling with fury. "So this is why you're really here," she spat. "Not to rescue us. To take what you can and leave us to die." "That's not true," Rachel snapped, her patience wearing thin. "My mission is to protect everyone, including you. But I can't control every person under my command." "Well, maybe you should try harder," Clara shot back, her voice echoing through the dome. As the argument escalated, Sophie Grant approached cautiously, holding a tablet. "Captain," she said softly, trying to interrupt. "There's more." Rachel took a deep breath, forcing herself to focus. "What is it, Sophie?" "The energy readings from the alien machine. They're spiking again," Sophie explained. "Whatever's happening down there, it's accelerating. If we don't act soon, it might be too late." Rachel clenched her fists, torn between addressing the growing unrest among her crew and dealing with the looming threat beneath the surface. She turned back to Aaron and Clara, her tone softer but resolute. "I'll put a stop to the salvaging. But in return, you need to cooperate. Tell me everything you know about those ruins." Aaron hesitated again, clearly conflicted. Finally, he nodded. "Fine," he said reluctantly, "but only because we don't have a choice." As the group prepared to discuss the next steps, Maya Torres approached Rachel quietly. "Captain," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "there's something else you should know. While we were in the tunnels, I noticed markings, symbols etched into the walls. They weren't random. They looked like instructions." Rachel frowned. "Instructions for what?" Mia hesitated, glancing nervously at Aaron and Clara. "For activating the machine." The revelation hung heavy in the air, unanswered questions swirling around them. Whatever secrets lay buried beneath the moon's surface, they were closer than ever to uncovering them. But at what cost? Sophie Grant sat hunched over her console, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she pieced together fragments of data from Mia's scans. The symbols etched into the walls of the alien tunnels were unlike anything she'd ever seen. Complex patterns that seemed to pulse with meaning. Slowly, painstakingly, she began decoding them, translating bits and pieces into something resembling instructions. "It's not just a machine," Sophie muttered to herself, her eyes widening as the picture came into focus. "It's a weapon." Captain Rachel Monroe stood nearby, listening intently. When Sophie finally turned to face her, her expression was grave. "The markings describe a process for activating the device," Sophie explained. "But there's a catch. It's unstable. If triggered incorrectly, it could destroy everything within a 100-mile radius." Rachel's stomach sank. A weapon capable of such destruction was both a blessing and a curse. In the right hands, it could be used to defend Earth against future threats. But in the wrong ones, or if mishandled, it could spell disaster. She glanced at Aaron and Clara, who were seated nearby, their faces pale as they listened to the revelation. "Do you think the settlers knew about this?" Rachel asked softly, though she already suspected the answer. Aaron shook his head slowly. "We only went down there once or twice, years ago," he admitted. "We didn't understand what we were looking at. All we knew was that bad things happened whenever someone got too close." Clara added bitterly, "And now you're here, ready to risk all our lives for something none of us asked for." Rachel ignored the jab, focusing instead on the task at hand. "If we leave the machine alone, it might still pose a threat," she said firmly. Whatever's causing those energy spikes isn't natural. We can't just walk away." As the debate continued, Lieutenant Daniel Harper entered the room, his face tense. "Captain, we've got trouble," he said urgently. "More of the crew is getting restless. Some are talking about mutiny if we don't prioritize getting the fleet back to Earth." Rachel cursed under her breath. The mission was unraveling faster than she could control it. Divided loyalties and fear were spreading like wildfire among her people. She needed a plan, and quickly. Back in the tunnels, Maya Torres worked alongside Ethan Cole to gather more information about the machine. Using portable scanners, they mapped out the chamber in detail, identifying key components based on Sophie's translations. The central structure pulsed rhythmically, its glow growing brighter with each passing hour. "We need to decide soon," Maya said nervously, glancing over her shoulder. "This thing feels alive, like it knows we're here." Ethan nodded, his grip tightening on his weapon. "If we're going to shut it down, or destroy it, we should do it before it gets any stronger." But destroying the machine wasn't an easy decision. Back in the colony, tempers flared as arguments erupted between the settlers and the fleet members. Aaron accused Rachel of caring more about the artifact than the lives of the colonists. Clara shouted that Earth had abandoned them once and would do so again without hesitation. Amidst the chaos, Sophie made a startling discovery. Hidden within the decoded symbols was a warning. The machine was designed not only as a weapon, but also as a failsafe. Activating it fully could unleash catastrophic consequences, not just for the moon, but potentially for entire star systems. Rachel called an emergency meeting with her senior officers. "We have two options," she said, her voice steady despite the weight of the situation. "We either disable the machine entirely, risking whatever defenses are tied to it, or we try to extract its core for study. Either way, time is running out." Before anyone could respond, alarms blared throughout the flagship. On the monitors, unknown ships appeared on the edge of their sensors, fast-moving vessels closing in rapidly. "They're not ours," Sophie said, her voice trembling. "They're coming straight for us." The room fell silent as realization dawned. They weren't alone anymore. Whoever, or whatever, was approaching, they had come for the machine too. And they weren't likely to leave empty-handed. The unknown ships descended upon the moon with terrifying speed, their sleek, jagged designs cutting through the darkness like predators closing in on prey. Back aboard the flagship, Captain Rachel Monroe's mind raced as she stared at the monitors. The vessels were unlike anything in Earth's fleet, alien, menacing, and clearly hostile. Their arrival left no room for doubt. Someone, or something, had been watching them. "Raise shields," Rachel barked, her voice sharp with urgency. "Prepare all weapons systems. We're not letting them take this colony, or that machine." Lieutenant Daniel Harper moved quickly, relaying orders to the crew. The flagship shuddered slightly as its defensive systems powered up, energy fields humming around the hull. Nearby, Sophie Grant worked frantically to gather more data on the approaching ships. "Captain," she said, her voice tight with tension, "they're scanning us, and they're targeting the colony." Rachel clenched her fists. "They know what's down there," she muttered. Turning to Daniel, she added, "Get our ground team back here now. We can't afford to lose anyone." In the tunnels below, Maya Torres and Ethan Cole heard the warning over their comms. The faint hum of the alien machine had grown louder, almost deafening, as if it sensed the danger above. "We need to move," Ethan said, his eyes darting toward the shadows. "Now." Mia nodded, grabbing her scanner and stuffing it into her pack. But as they turned to leave, the ground trembled violently. From deeper within the chamber, the monstrous guardian emerged once again, its glowing red eyes fixed on them with unmistakable intent. "We're not getting out without a fight," Maya said grimly, raising her weapon. She fired a burst of shots at the creature, but the bullets ricocheted off its armored hide, doing little more than enraging it further. Ethan stepped forward, aiming for its legs in an attempt to slow it down. "Keep moving," he shouted, firing repeatedly. "I'll hold it off." "No way," Maya shot back, refusing to leave him behind. Together, they backed away, trading shots with the beast as it lunged after them. Every step felt like a gamble, the walls of the tunnel shaking with each roar. Above ground, chaos erupted as the alien ships opened fire. Bright beams of energy lanced through the sky, striking the colony domes and sending shards of metal flying. Aaron and Clara huddled together, shielding themselves from the debris as explosions rocked the ground. The settlers scrambled for cover, their faces etched with terror. Daniel led the evacuation effort, urging everyone toward the shuttles. "Move faster," he yelled, helping an injured settler to safety. Behind him, the flagship unleashed salvos of missiles, attempting to drive the attackers back. The battle lit up the darkened sky, flashes of light illuminating the devastation below. Back aboard the flagship, Rachel coordinated the defense while grappling with guilt over leaving the colonists behind. "We can't protect them and fight at the same time," she said to Sophie, her voice heavy with regret. "If we don't hold these ships off, none of us will make it out alive." Sophie nodded grimly, her fingers flying across the console. "There's one thing we haven't tried yet," she said suddenly. "The machine. If we activate it, even partially, it might create some kind of shockwave, enough to disable those ships." Rachel hesitated, weighing the risks. Activating the machine could mean disaster, but staying passive would guarantee defeat. "Do it," she said finally, "but someone has to stay behind to trigger it." Aaron volunteered before anyone could stop him. "It's my home," he said firmly. "If anyone's going to do this, it should be me." Clara protested, tears streaming down her face, but Aaron silenced her with a determined look. "You have to go," he told her. "Promise me you'll survive." As the fleet prepared for a desperate retreat, Aaron climbed back down into the tunnels, clutching the control panel Mia had salvaged. The machine pulsed brighter with every step he took, its power coursing through the air. He knew the odds weren't in his favor, but sometimes survival wasn't just about living. It was about sacrifice. Aaron moved quickly through the tunnels, his breaths shallow and uneven as the oppressive heat of the alien machine pressed against him. The control panel in his hands felt heavier with each step, its buttons glowing faintly in response to the energy pulsing around him. He knew what he had to do, but the weight of it bore down on his chest like a vice. The chamber loomed ahead, the massive structure at its center now blazing with an intense blue light that bathed the walls in an otherworldly glow. The air vibrated with power, making it hard to think clearly. Aaron paused for a moment, staring at the machine. It was beautiful and terrifying. For years he had avoided this place, fearing what lay beneath the surface. Now he was about to unleash its full potential, knowing it might cost him everything. He set the panel down carefully, his hands trembling as he began connecting wires and adjusting settings based on Sophie's hastily scribbled instructions. The symbols etched into the walls seemed to pulse in time with his heartbeat, urging him forward. Each movement felt deliberate, yet frantic. Time was running out. Above ground, the battle raged on. The flagship unleashed volley after volley of missiles, trying desperately to hold off the alien ships. Explosions lit up the sky, shaking the ground beneath the survivors' feet. Clara clung to Daniel as they boarded one of the last shuttles, her eyes fixed on the colony entrance, hoping against hope that Aaron would appear. "He's not coming back, is he?" she whispered, her voice breaking. Daniel didn't answer. He couldn't. Instead, he guided her onto the shuttle and sealed the hatch behind them. As the engines roared to life, the remaining settlers braced themselves for liftoff. Back aboard the flagship, Captain Rachel Monroe watched the monitors, her heart pounding. The alien ships were relentless, their firepower overwhelming. "Status report," she demanded, her voice cutting through the chaos on the bridge. "One more hit and we'll lose shields," Sophie replied, her fingers flying across the console. "If Aaron doesn't activate that machine soon." She didn't finish the sentence. They all knew what failure meant. In the chamber, Aaron worked furiously, sweat dripping down his face as the machine's hum grew louder. Sparks flew from the panel as he connected the final wire. A sudden tremor knocked him off balance, and he fell hard against the ground. Pain shot through his side, but he forced himself back up, gritting his teeth. "Come on," he muttered under his breath, pressing the activation sequence. The machine responded instantly, its glow intensifying until it filled the entire chamber. The energy surged outward, rippling through the tunnels like a tidal wave. Aaron stumbled backward, shielding his eyes from the blinding light. He could feel the power coursing through the air, threatening to consume him. But he didn't run. Instead, he stood his ground, watching as the shockwave spread upward, toward the surface. Above ground, the effect was immediate. The alien ships shuddered violently, their systems failing as the wave of energy engulfed them. One by one, they plummeted from the sky, crashing into the barren landscape below. The flagship's crew stared in stunned silence as the threat vanished almost as quickly as it had appeared. But the victory came at a cost. Back in the chamber, Aaron collapsed to his knees, the machine's energy still surging around him. His vision blurred, and he struggled to draw breath. Through the haze, he thought of Clara, safe aboard the shuttle, and smiled faintly. "I kept my promise," he whispered before darkness overtook him. As the fleet prepared to leave the moon behind, Rachel looked out at the ruined colony one last time. She didn't know if Aaron had survived, but she knew his sacrifice had saved them all. And though they carried the scars of this mission with them, they also carried hope. Whatever secrets lay buried beneath that desolate world, they would remain undisturbed. For now, the flagship drifted silently through the void, its battered hull bearing the scars of battle. Inside, the mood was somber. Survivors gathered in small groups, speaking in hushed tones as they processed what had happened. For some, relief outweighed grief. For others, the weight of loss pressed down on their shoulders like a heavy stone. Clara sat alone near a viewport, staring out at the endless expanse of stars. Her hands rested limply in her lap, her eyes red from crying. "He's gone," she whispered to herself, though no one else was there to hear. The words felt hollow, yet they echoed endlessly in her mind. Aaron had stayed behind, not just to protect her, but to give everyone a chance at survival. She wanted to believe he was still alive somewhere, waiting to be found. But deep down, she knew better. The machine's power had been too great, its destruction too absolute. Captain Rachel Monroe walked among her crew, offering quiet words of reassurance where needed. She carried her own burden of guilt, knowing that decisions she'd made, or failed to make, had led them to this point. Yet, amidst the sorrow, there was also resolve. They had faced unimaginable odds and survived. That meant something. Sophie Grant stood nearby, reviewing data collected during their final moments on the moon. The readings were incomplete, fragmented by the chaos of the battle and the shockwave that followed. Still, enough remained to paint a picture. The machine had been both a weapon and a failsafe, designed to eradicate threats on a massive scale. Its activation hadn't just destroyed the alien ships, it had destabilized the moon itself. What little remained of the colony would soon crumble into nothingness. "We'll never go back," Sophie murmured to Lieutenant Daniel Harper, who stood beside her. "Even if we wanted to." Daniel nodded slowly, his expression grim. "Maybe that's for the best. Some places aren't meant to be revisited." As the fleet continued its journey home, Rachel called a meeting with her senior officers. The room was quiet, each person lost in their thoughts. "This mission wasn't easy," Rachel began, her voice steady but tinged with emotion. "We came looking for answers, and we found more questions. But we also learned something important. Humanity isn't ready for everything out there. Not yet." Her gaze swept across the room, landing briefly on Clara, who sat quietly in the corner. "Aaron Blake gave us a second chance. Let's honor his sacrifice by using what we've learned wisely." Clara looked up, meeting Rachel's eyes. There was gratitude in her gaze, but also determination. He believed in doing what was right, she said softly, even when it cost him everything. When the fleet finally reached Earth weeks later, news of their victory spread quickly. Official reports glossed over the details, focusing instead on the bravery of the crew and the elimination of an unknown threat. But those who had been there knew the truth. The real heroes were the ones left behind. In the months that followed, life began to return to normal, or as close to normal as it could be. Clara rebuilt hers piece by piece, finding solace in memories of Aaron and the promise of a brighter future. She often returned to the same spot where she used to watch the stars, gazing upward with a mixture of sadness and hope. Rachel, too, found herself reflecting on the mission during quiet moments. The choices she'd made haunted her, but so did the resilience of those around her. Humanity had stared into the abyss and come back changed, but not broken. And somewhere, far beyond the reach of Earth's light, the ruins of the colony lay buried beneath layers of dust and silence. The machine slept once more, its secrets guarded by time and shadow. Perhaps one day, someone else would uncover them. Until then, the story of Aaron Blake and the forgotten moon remained etched in the hearts of those who had lived it, a reminder of courage, sacrifice, and the unyielding spirit of exploration.